Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Today is Saturday, it's March 15th of 2025. Today is day 526. Just before recording, I saw in the Washington Post that President Trump has ordered a large-scale military strike or large-scale strikes, plural, against the Houthis in Yemen. As a warning to Iran, the president vowed to use overwhelming lethal force against the militant group for its attacks on commercial ships and U.S. forces in the region. Thus, as the vulnerabilities we're seeing throughout the Middle East. In addition, there's another offer on the table for the extension of a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. This is I've kind of lost track of, how many options there have been, but this offer was reported by Axios. Witkoff, President Trump's special envoy for the Middle East, gave parties mid last week an updated proposal. This includes extending the Gaza ceasefire until after Ramadan and Passover, which is set to end on April 20th, in exchange for resuming humanitarian aid into Gaza. According to Arab news sources, Witkoff's new proposal called for the release of 5 living hostages and 9 bodies. Israel agreed to Witkoff's proposal, and the mediators were waiting for Hamas's response. That's what I saw reported in the last 24 hours. Witkoff's proposal called for the extending of the ceasefire, as I mentioned, in addition to the resumption of aid. Then yesterday, Hamas responded with a statement. The leadership of Hamas received the proposal from mediators to resume negotiations, and they, in their statement, they said that the Hamas movement responded positively and that they submitted a reply in the morning, I believe that was yesterday morning, agreeing to release the Israeli-American soldier Adnan Alexander. So he was a soldier in the Israeli army. He holds American citizenship, along with the body of 4 other dual nationals. So these are the bodies of, I believe, Israeli-American citizens. Hamas said that they reaffirmed their readiness to engage in negotiations and to reach a comprehensive agreement on the second phase issues and urged Israel to fully meet its obligations. After that, Netanyahu's office in Israel responded today and said that while Israel accepted Witkoff's plan, Hamas continues to reject it without any change in its stance. At the same time, it persists in psychological manipulation and maneuvering. The prime minister was set to hold a ministerial team meeting today on Saturday evening in Israel to receive a detailed report from the negotiating team and to make decisions on the next steps for the release of hostages. After Israel responded, the U.S. responded. All of this happened today. The U.S. had a statement from the Office of the Special Presidential Envoy, from Steve Witkoff, and from the National Security Council. They said that President Trump made it clear that Hamas will either release hostages immediately or will pay a severe price. In terms of, all this has been playing out over the last few days. On Wednesday evening in Doha, Special Envoy Witkoff and the National Security Council Senior Director for the Middle East and for North Africa, that's Eric Traeger, they presented what was called a bridge proposal. The idea of the bridge proposal was what we've been talking about, this extension of phase 1 to carry through Ramadan and Passover to April 20th, and that would allow for time to negotiate a framework for a permanent ceasefire, which of course was the main issue of phase 2, which is kind of a sticking point. It's always been the sticking point. Hamas has said that they would not release all the hostages until a permanent ceasefire was agreed to. Israel said they have no intention of stopping the fighting. So it seems to continue to be a sticking point. This bridge proposal, Hamas said, according to the dynamics of the bridge proposal, Hamas would release living hostages in exchange for prisoners. In accordance with the previous formula, then phase 1 would be extended, as I just described. The U.S. would then use this time to work towards a durable solution. Through Qatari and Egyptian partners, Hamas was told in no uncertain terms that this bridge has to be implemented soon, that there's a very strict timeline on this offer, and that the dual U.S.-American citizen, Adnan Alexander, has to be released immediately. Now, in the statement from the U.S. that I just mentioned that came out, I believe, today, they said that unfortunately, Hamas has chosen to respond by publicly claiming to be flexible while privately making demands that are entirely impractical without a permanent ceasefire. Hamas is making a very bad bet that time is on its side. It is not. Hamas is well aware of the deadline and should know that we will respond accordingly if the deadline passes. So that's the latest in the chaos of the potential of a ceasefire agreement. All the while, there has been bombing and deaths, not nearly the way we saw before the ceasefire agreement that was implemented in, 8 weeks ago or so. Sorry, my months are all running together. I'll talk more about how many deaths there have been in Gaza and what's been happening in the West Bank. Let's talk about the West Bank first. There's been continued war on the West Bank. Shin Bet had a statement saying that there was a Jewish terrorist attack last night in Kirbet al-Marjam in the northern West Bank. So this is in the occupied territories. According to settler accounts, Palestinians attempted to steal a herd that was owned by Israeli citizens, that would be settlers, and subsequently a group of masked Jewish individuals entered a Palestinian village in the West Bank and began to set fire to homes and vehicles. Israeli army and border police arrived at the scene during the night. They dispersed the riots. There were 5 Palestinian homes and 2 vehicles set on fire. There were no injuries reported. According to security sources, the Jewish attackers attempted to head towards the village of Duma, and security forces pursued and prevented them. The police in Shin Bet decided to launch a joint investigation, but no arrests have been announced thus far. Israel is also buckling down on foreign NGOs. The Washington Post reported that Israel has enacted new rules for NGOs that are working in the Palestinian territories. There are going to be new visa and registration rules for international agencies. We knew that this was coming. Restrictions have been tightening quite significantly for visas. These include restrictions on humanitarian groups that the groups say would politicize their work, putting local and international staff at risk and undermining relief efforts in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. The new measures, which were just announced this last week, give officials broad authority to reject the registration of non-governmental organizations providing assistance to Palestinians using far-reaching sets of guidelines. Among the criteria are whether an NGO or its employees have ever called for a boycott of Israel, whether or not they've if these organizations have denied the existence of Israel as a Jewish and democratic state, that's in quotes, or expressed support for legal proceedings against Israeli citizens in international courts for acts carried out while serving in the Israeli military or security agencies. So, of course, that would apply to the International Court of Justice and other international acts of accountability. Aid groups say they're particularly worried about the provision requiring them to submit the names of local staff, Palestinian staff, which Israel contends is necessary to vet employees for potential ties to militias. So the Diaspora Affairs Ministry said in a statement that there are 170 international NGOs registered in Israel, roughly, including groups like Oxfam, Doctors Without Borders, the Norwegian Refugee Council, which only have 6 months to apply or reapply under the new system, or they will have their registration revoked. And then if they don't get approved, they only have 7 days to appeal. There are updates on the occupation of Israeli soldiers and Palestinian communities in the West Bank. We've been talking about, the days of the incursions of the Israeli military in the north of the occupied West Bank. March 15th, the Media Committee in Tulkarm reported that the occupation of the Israeli military and its assault on Tulkarm is in its 48th day. And in Ner Shams, it's in its 35th day. 24,000 Palestinians have been displaced just from those 2 areas, Tulkarm and Ner Shams, from camps and evacuations. Occupation forces fired on ambulances evacuating patients, according to the media from Tulkarm. Residents of Al-Maraba neighborhood were forced to leave at gunpoint, and Nasser Mosque's gate was blown up. Homes were searched, and a house was set on fire. According to reports, an assault killed 13 people so far. That was as of March 15th. Meanwhile, in Gaza, 3 journalists were killed and injured in a targeted strike in Beit Lahia during their flying of drones over Gaza, and a 4th separate female journalist died from a previous bombing attack during the war. News reports, according to Palestinian sources, have called what happened in Beit Lahia in Gaza a massacre as the death toll continued to rise, with 9 people being reported killed, including 3 journalists and 2 photographers. So that is the update on Saturday, March 15th, day 526. Might you use this as motivation for prayer as those of us who are Christian continue in the Lenten season, a season of lament, a season of reflection, seeking to draw us closer to God and draw us closer to one another as we seek peace and advocate for justice and a comprehensive and permanent ceasefire and lasting solutions to the ongoing war and violence and conflicts in Gaza and Palestine and the Middle East. In the name of Christ, amen.